I stood at my daughter's gate watching her scrub the porch on her knees while her mother-in-law lounged in the rocking chair I'd bought for Sarah's birthday. My beautiful girl looked up, tears streaming down her face, and I saw the bruise on her wrist. 8 minutes. That's all it took to get every last one of them out. When I closed that gate behind them, I only said 3 words that changed everything. Read the deed. My name is Alvina Thompson, and I'm 68 years old. For 15 years after my husband Robert passed away, I worked myself to the bone as a real estate agent in Nashville, Tennessee. Every commission, every bonus, every penny I could spare went into a special savings account. I had one goal: to give my only daughter, Sarah, the wedding gift that would secure her future. Growing up, Sarah watched me struggle as a young widow. She'd seen me work 3 jobs to keep our small apartment, witnessed me skip meals so she could have new school clothes. When she graduated from college and became an elementary school teacher, she made me promise to start taking care of myself. But old habits die hard, and I kept saving, kept working, kept dreaming of the day I could give her something magnificent. The house appeared in my listings on a foggy March morning, a 1920s craftsman-style home sitting on 5 acres of Tennessee countryside, complete with a wraparound porch and original hardwood floors, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and a kitchen that begged for family gatherings. The elderly owner, Mrs. Garrison, wanted it to go to a young family who would fill it with laughter again. "This is it," I whispered to myself, running my fingers over the listing photos. $285,000. Every cent I'd saved over 15 years, plus a small loan I'd qualified for. My retirement fund, essentially, but what better investment than my daughter's happiness? Sarah's wedding to Brian Morrison took place that June in a small church ceremony with about 50 guests. She looked radiant in her grandmother's wedding dress, carefully altered to fit her perfectly. Brian seemed charming enough, a bank manager with a steady job and good manners. He spoke lovingly about building a life together, about the children they'd have, about growing old on a front porch somewhere. After the reception, I asked the newlyweds to follow me in their car. Sarah kept asking where we were going, laughing at my mysterious smile. When we pulled up to the Craftsman house, now adorned with a giant white bow on the front door, her laughter turned to tears. "Mom, no," she gasped, clutching Brian's arm. "This can't be, you didn't." "Welcome home, sweetheart," I said, handing her the keys. "Every young family needs a place to put down roots." The joy on her face made every sacrifice worth it. She ran through the house like a child on Christmas morning, exclaiming over every detail. The clawfoot tub in the master bathroom, the built-in bookshelves in the den, the garden plot already tilled and ready for planting. Brian's reaction struck me as more subdued, but I attributed it to masculine reserve. He shook my hand, formally said all the right things about taking care of Sarah and the house. His eyes, though, seemed to be calculating something I couldn't quite identify. Those first 2 years were golden. Sarah transformed the house into a warm, welcoming home. She planted heirloom tomatoes and sunflowers, hung bird feeders from the oak trees, painted the nursery a soft yellow in anticipation of future babies. I visited monthly, helping her refinish furniture found at estate sales, teaching her my mother's recipes in that spacious kitchen. Brian worked long hours at the bank, often coming home after dark. Sarah never complained, busy with her 4th grade class and the house. She'd started a small tutoring business on the side, saving money for the family they planned to start soon. The first sign of trouble came during a July visit. I found 2 people I didn't recognize sitting at Sarah's dining room table, being served lunch by my daughter. Brian's parents, Eugene and Martha Morrison, had apparently been staying there for 3 weeks. Eugene had back surgery, Brian explained when I expressed surprise. They needed somewhere to recover. Martha, a woman in her early 60s with sharp features and calculating eyes, barely acknowledged my presence. Eugene, overweight and perpetually scowling, complained about the sandwich Sarah had made him. Wrong mustard, apparently. "How long will you be staying?" I asked politely. "Oh, who knows?" Martha waved dismissively. "Eugene needs proper care. Can't trust those rehabilitation places. Family takes care of family." Something cold settled in my stomach as I watched Sarah quietly remake Eugene's sandwich without a word of protest. In the bathroom, I discovered prescription bottles dated from January. The surgery had been 6 months ago. Before I left that day, I pulled Sarah aside in the garden. "Honey, are you okay with this arrangement?" She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's just temporary, Mom. Ryan says we need to help them get back on their feet." "Sarah, those prescription bottles are 6 months old. How long is temporary?" Her hands stilled on the tomato plants she'd been tying. "Mom, please. Brian's already stressed about it. I don't want to make waves." I wanted to say more, but the exhaustion in her voice stopped me. Instead, I hugged her tightly, noting how thin she'd gotten. "You know you can call me anytime, right, for any reason?" She nodded against my shoulder, and I left with a growing unease that would prove all too justified. The change happened gradually, like watching storm clouds gather on a distant horizon. Sarah's weekly phone calls became sporadic, then rare. When she did call, our conversations were brief and interrupted by constant background noise. Multiple voices, television blaring, dogs barking. She sounded perpetually exhausted, her usual cheerful chatter replaced by monotone responses. "How are things, sweetheart?" I'd ask. "Fine, Mom, just busy with family obligations." Family obligations. The phrase stuck in my mind like a splinter. My friend Dorothy lived about 2 miles from Sarah's house. We'd known each other since our children were in elementary school together, and she'd become my eyes and ears in the area. One September afternoon, she called with concerning news. "Alvina, I drove past Sarah's place yesterday. There were 3 moving trucks in the driveway." My heart sank. Moving trucks. Big ones, and I counted at least 4 cars with Illinois and Missouri plates. "Thought you should know." I called Sarah immediately. She answered on the 5th ring, sounding breathless. "Oh, those trucks Brian's brother Marcus needed to store some furniture temporarily. His apartment building had a flood." "Sarah, honey, 3 trucks worth of furniture." "Mom, I really can't talk right now. I need to start dinner for everyone." "Everyone? How many people are there?" The pause stretched too long. "Just family. I'll call you later, okay?" She hung up before I could respond. I decided to make an unscheduled visit the following week. What I found turned my blood cold. The once pristine front yard was littered with vehicles. A rusty pickup truck on blocks 2 sedans with missing hubcaps, and a van with a cracked windshield. Sarah's little Honda was wedged between them, barely accessible. Inside the house I'd bought with such hope looked like a boarding house. Strangers lounged on the furniture feet up on Sarah's grandmother's coffee table. The smell of cigarette smoke competed with something burnt from the kitchen. I found Sarah at the stove stirring multiple pots while a woman I'd never seen before criticized her cooking technique. "You need more salt in those potatoes," the woman said. "Marcus likes them seasoned properly." "Sarah," I called out. She spun around and I bit back a gasp. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her clothes hung loosely on her frame, and her usual neat ponytail was a messy bun, with escaped strands sticking to her sweaty face. "Mom, I didn't know you were coming." "Clearly," I said, surveying the chaos. "Who are all these people?" Brian appeared from the living room, his parents flanking him like bodyguards. "Alvina, you should call before dropping by." "I shouldn't need permission to visit my daughter." He stiffened. "This is our home. We have rules." Our home. The words ignited something dangerous in my chest, but I kept my voice level. "Perhaps you could introduce me to your house guests." The introductions revealed the extent of the invasion. Marcus Morrison, Brian's younger brother. Unemployed with a sullen attitude and wandering hands that kept trying to grab Sarah as she served dinner. Marcus's girlfriend, Tanya, who spent the entire meal on her phone, occasionally barking orders at Sarah for more drinks, different food cleaner plates. Brian's sister, Janet, had also moved in along with her boyfriend, Roy, a man whose prison tattoos and dead eyes made my skin crawl. Their 3 teenage children, 2 boys and a girl, treated the house like a personal playground, dropping food on the carpet, playing music at deafening volumes, leaving doors open so the heating bill must have been astronomical. During dinner, I watched in horror as 12 people ate the meal Sarah had prepared alone, while she stood in the kitchen doorway waiting to fetch whatever they demanded. When she finally tried to sit down with a small plate, Martha snapped at her. "The dishes won't wash themselves, Sarah. We don't have a maid here." "Let her eat first," I said sharply. Eugene's fork paused midway to his mouth. "This is a Morrison family matter, Alvina. We handle our household our way." "This isn't your household, it's Sarah's house." Brian's face darkened. "Actually, it's our house, mine and Sarah's, and we decide who lives here." I wanted to scream the truth, that the house remained in my name, that Sarah only had use rights, that I'd protected my daughter in ways he couldn't imagine. But something warned me to stay silent. These people were parasites, and parasites were often dangerous when threatened. After dinner, I helped Sarah with the mountain of dishes while the others dispersed throughout the house. In the quiet of the kitchen, I tried again. "Sweetheart, this isn't right. You're being treated like a servant in your own home." She scrubbed a pot with unusual vigor. "They're Brian's family. I have to make an effort." For how long, Dorothy said she saw moving trucks. These people aren't visiting, they're living here. Marcus lost his apartment. Janet's going through a divorce. Eugene and Martha can't afford their medication and rent. "That's not your responsibility, Sarah." She finally looked at me, and the defeat in her eyes broke my heart. "Brian says it is. He says a good wife supports her husband's family, that I'm being selfish if I complain." "You're not being selfish. You're being used." "Mom, please." Tears pooled in her eyes. "I can handle it. Just give me time to figure things out." I left that night with a heavy heart and a growing certainty that time was exactly what we didn't have. In the car, I made a decision. If Sarah couldn't protect herself, I'd have to protect her. But first, I needed to understand exactly what we were dealing with. The next morning, I found something that changed everything. While going through my files to review the house paperwork, I discovered a folder of bills Sarah had been forwarding to me for tax purposes. Electric bills in Marcus's name, cable bills for services at Sarah's address under Janet's name, official mail for multiple Morrison family members, all listing the Craftsman house as their permanent residence. They weren't guests, they were colonizers, and they were establishing legal residency in the house I'd bought with my life's savings. I called Dorothy immediately. "I need you to do something for me. Drive by Sarah's place randomly over the next week. Take photos of the vehicles, the people coming and going. Document everything." "What are you planning, Alvina?" "I'm planning to save my daughter. But first, I need to know exactly how deep this goes." That night, unable to sleep, I pulled out the original deed and trust documents for the house. Thank God for my years in real estate and the lawyer who'd helped structure the purchase. The house was in my name, held in a specific type of trust that gave Sarah lifetime use rights but prevented her from selling, transferring, or encumbering the property without my written consent. I'd done it to protect her in case of divorce or financial hardship. I never imagined I'd need it to save her from an invasion of locusts disguised as family. December in Tennessee can be mild or miserable, and that Christmas Eve brought the worst ice storm in 20 years. I loaded my car carefully with presents, homemade cookies, and a full Christmas dinner I'd prepared for Sarah's family. The family I thought would be just her and Brian, maybe his parents. I had no idea I was about to walk into a nightmare that would finally show me the full extent of my daughter's suffering. The drive took 3 hours instead of 90 minutes crawling along icy roads, while semi-trucks jackknifed in ditches. By the time I reached Sarah's neighborhood, darkness had fallen and the street looked like a used car lot. Vehicles packed the driveway and spilled onto the lawn, blocking any normal access to the house. I parked a quarter-mile away, the only spot available, and trudged through the frozen slush, carrying what I could manage. My feet were numb by the time I reached the front door, which stood partially open despite the freezing temperature. Loud music and raucous laughter poured out into the night. The scene inside stopped me cold. The beautiful hardwood floors I'd polished with Sarah were scarred and stained. Cigarette burns dotted the furniture, and someone had carved initials into the antique dining table. But worse than the physical damage was the sight of my daughter on her hands and knees, scrubbing the floor while Brian's teenage nephews played a video game, deliberately dropping chips and soda onto the clean sections. "You missed a spot," one of them said, grinding a Cheeto into the carpet with his heel. Sarah simply moved to clean it without a word. She hadn't seen me yet, and I used that moment to really look at her. The weight loss I'd noticed at Thanksgiving had accelerated. Her wrists looked fragile as bird bones. When she turned to rinse her cloth in the bucket, I saw the bruises. 5 perfect finger marks on her upper arm, a larger one on her forearm as if someone had grabbed her roughly. "Sarah Elizabeth," I said softly. She jerked upright, knocking over the bucket. Dirty water spread across the floor she'd just cleaned, and her face crumpled. "I'm sorry," she whispered, dropping back down to contain the spill. "I'm so sorry, I'll clean it up." "Get up," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut through the chaos. "Right now." Something in my tone must have reached her because she stood slowly wringing her hands. Martha appeared from the kitchen wearing an apron I recognized as Sarah's grandmother's. "Oh, you're here," she said with false sweetness. "Sarah didn't mention you were coming. We don't really have room for overnight guests." "Good thing I'm not staying overnight then," I replied, not breaking eye contact. "Where's Brian?" "In the den with the men. They're watching the game. You know how men are about their sports." I did know. I also knew my Robert would never have let his family treat me like an indentured servant while he watched television. I helped Sarah clean up the spilled water, then followed her to the kitchen where she immediately started checking multiple pots on the stove. The counter was covered with elaborate dishes in various stages of preparation. "How many people are you cooking for?" I asked. 18, she said quietly. "Roy's brother and his family arrived yesterday." 18 people. And you're doing all of this alone. Tanya has a bad back. Janet gets migraines from the heat. Martha is supervising. Supervising. I watch Martha sample from various pots, criticizing each one. Too salty, too bland, too thick, too thin. Nothing was right. Sarah adjusted seasonings with shaking hands, apologizing repeatedly. "Where are you sleeping?" I asked suddenly. Sarah's stirring faltered. "What? With 18 people in a 4-bedroom house, where are you and Brian sleeping?" We moved to the attic. It's fine, Mom. It's cozy." The attic. The unfinished attic I'd seen during the house inspection with no insulation and exposed beams. In December. "Show me," I said. "Mom, dinner's almost ready." "Show me now, Sarah." She led me upstairs past the master bedroom where Eugene and Martha's belongings sprawled across the space I'd imagined would hold Sarah's future nursery. Past the guest rooms crammed with air mattresses and suitcases. Up a pull-down ladder to the attic space. It was worse than I'd imagined. A mattress on the floor, 2 small space heaters fighting a losing battle against the cold drafts. Their clothes in plastic bins because there was no closet. The beautiful wedding quilt my mother had made for Sarah crumpled in a corner while I could see through the floor gaps that her grandmother's quilts were being used as dog beds in Janet's room. "Oh, sweetheart," I breathed. "It's temporary," she said quickly, "just until everyone gets back on their feet." I noticed a notebook partially hidden under the mattress and bent to retrieve it before she could stop me. Her journal. I opened it to the most recent entry dated 2 days prior. Mom was right. I should have listened, but it's too late now. They'll never leave. Brian says I'm overreacting, that family helps family, but his family only takes. I'm so tired. My principal asked why I've been wearing long sleeves in the heated classroom. How do I tell her it's to hide the bruises? How do I tell anyone that I'm a prisoner in the house my mother gave me with such love? My hands shook as I read more entries. The financial exploitation. Brian's paycheck went directly to his mother for household management, while Sarah's teacher salary paid for everything. Her credit cards maxed out in other people's names. Her teacher retirement fund drained into an account Brian shared with his mother. The physical intimidation. Roy cornering her in the laundry room, Marcus accidentally walking in on her in the bathroom, Eugene throwing dishes when meals weren't to his satisfaction, and Brian dismissing it all, telling her she was too sensitive, too selfish, not trying hard enough to make his family feel welcome. "We're leaving," I said, closing the journal. "Pack a bag. You're coming home with me." "I can't," she whispered. Brian will what?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "He said if I embarrass him in front of his family, if I don't show proper respect, he'll make sure I never teach again. He has connections at the bank, knows people on the school board. And where would I go? This is my home. The only thing I have left of what you gave me." That's when the final piece clicked into place. They weren't just stealing her money and her labor. They were stealing her spirit, her future, and the gift I'd given her. The house had become a prison instead of a sanctuary. "Sarah listened to me very carefully," I said, gripping her shoulders gently. "Do you trust me?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Then I need you to survive the next few days. Can you do that? Just pretend everything is normal, don't let them see any change. I'll handle everything else." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done months ago, protect my daughter." We went back downstairs where I played the role of the visiting mother-in-law. I complimented Martha's supervision, thanked Eugene for letting me join their family celebration, even made small talk with Roy about football. All the while, I memorized faces, noted behaviors, and planned. During dinner, I used my phone discreetly to photograph the scene. 18 people gorging themselves on food Sarah had prepared alone. My daughter serving everyone, never sitting down to eat. The casual cruelty as they criticized every dish while demanding seconds. Janet's children throwing food at each other while their mother texted on her phone. When Marcus made a crude joke about Sarah's weight loss, saying she was finally getting skinny enough to be attractive, Brian laughed along with the others. That's when I knew there was no redemption possible here. This wasn't a family dealing with hard times. This was a pack of predators who had identified my daughter as prey. I stayed as long as I could stomach it, helping Sarah clean up while the others retreated to various rooms to continue their celebrations. As I prepared to leave, navigating through the obstacle course of vehicles, Eugene appeared on the porch. "Next time, call first," he said, his tone making it clear there shouldn't be a next time. "We have rules in this family." "I'm sure you do," I replied calmly. "Family is so important, isn't it? Taking care of each other, protecting what's yours." He missed the warning in my words, too drunk on his own power to recognize a threat. Exactly. Sarah's learning that. Took some training, but she's getting there. Training. Like she was a dog. I smiled the kind of smile I'd learned in 30 years of real estate negotiations. The kind that meant someone was about to lose everything. "Well, Eugene, I believe in family too, and I always protect what's mine." I left him standing there, confused by my cheerfulness. Let him wonder. In less than a week, he'd understand exactly what I meant. They all would. The drive home through the ice storm was treacherous, but my mind was crystal clear. I had work to do, calls to make, plans to set in motion. They wanted to play games with my daughter's life. Fine. But I'd been playing games a lot longer than they had, and I'd never lost when something this important was at stake. They'd made 3 critical mistakes. First, they'd underestimated Sarah, thinking her kindness was weakness. Second, they'd underestimated me, dismissing me as just another elderly mother who could be managed. But their biggest mistake? They'd moved into my house. And I was about to teach them why you never ever mess with a real estate agent when her daughter's future is on the line. The day after Christmas, I sat in the office of James Patterson, the same real estate attorney who'd helped me structure the purchase of Sarah's house 5 years ago. James was in his 70s now, supposedly retired, but he'd come in specially when I called him on Christmas night. "Alvina," he said, reviewing the documents spread across his desk, "this is exactly why we structured the trust this way. Your foresight is about to save your daughter." The trust was ironclad. The house remained in my name, with Sarah holding lifetime use rights. She could live there forever, but she couldn't sell, transfer, or encumber the property without my written consent. More importantly, as the actual owner, I retained the right to determine who could and couldn't be on the property. They've established residency, I said, showing him the photos Dorothy had taken and the bills in various Morrison family members' names. Won't that complicate things? James smiled, the kind of smile that had terrified opposing counsel for 40 years. They've established residency in a property they have no legal right to occupy. They're not tenants. They never signed a lease, never paid rent. They're not family members of the owner. That's you, not Sarah. At best, they're guests who have overstayed their welcome. At worst, they're trespassers. What about Brian? He's Sarah's husband. Brian has spousal rights to occupy the property with Sarah, but he doesn't own it and can't invite others to establish residency without the owner's consent, which you never gave. We spent 3 hours crafting the legal strategy. Formal trespass notices for everyone except Brian and Sarah, cease and desist orders for the financial exploitation, documentation of property damage for civil suits. James even suggested something I hadn't considered, checking for outstanding warrants or legal issues with our unwelcome guests. People who behave like this often have histories, he said. Let's see what we find. The private investigator James recommended was a former police detective named Carl Winters. Within 48 hours, Carl had uncovered a goldmine of information that explained why the Morrison clan had descended on Sarah's house like locusts. Marcus Morrison had 2 outstanding warrants for unpaid child support in Illinois, totaling $37,000. He'd fled the state to avoid arrest, and his ex-wife had been searching for him for 8 months. The flood in his apartment was actually an eviction for non-payment. Roy, Janet's boyfriend, was on parole for check fraud and identity theft. Part of his parole conditions included staying in Missouri and maintaining stable employment. He'd violated both by moving to Tennessee and remaining unemployed for 6 months. One phone call to his parole officer would send him back to prison. Eugene Morrison owed $50,000 in gambling debts to some very unpleasant people in Chicago. He'd been using a fake disability claim to avoid working while hiding out at Sarah's house. Martha had her own issues, 3 lawsuits from previous landlords for property damage and unpaid rent. Even Tanya had a paper trail of retail theft charges and bad checks. The teenagers had been expelled from their schools for violence and theft. Janet herself was fleeing creditors from a failed MLM scheme that had left dozens of people financially ruined. They're not a family, Carl said, handing me the comprehensive report. They're a criminal organization, and they've found the perfect mark in your daughter, someone too kind to throw them out and too isolated to ask for help. The financial investigation revealed even worse news. Brian had systematically drained Sarah's accounts, moving money to his mother's control. They'd taken out credit cards in Sarah's name, maxing them out on purchases that were shipped to addresses in other states, likely being resold for cash. Her teacher retirement account, which should have had $18,000, was empty. This is wire fraud, James said when I showed him the evidence. Crossing state lines makes it federal. Brian could be looking at serious prison time. I felt a cold satisfaction at that thought, but my focus remained on Sarah. We needed to act fast. Carl's surveillance had revealed something disturbing. Eugene had been in contact with a developer who specialized in flipping rural properties into subdivisions. They'd been discussing the upcoming availability of Sarah's house with Eugene, promising he could deliver a quick sale below market value. They're planning to force her to sign over the deed, I said. James nodded grimly. We need to move before they do. I suggest a coordinated strike, legal law enforcement and family support all at once. I contacted Sarah's 3 closest teacher friends, women who'd been worried about her but hadn't known how to help. Linda, Marcy, and Deborah were horrified when I shared what I'd discovered. We knew something was wrong, Linda said. She's been wearing long sleeves even on hot days, eating lunch leftovers from the cafeteria. We offered to help, but she always said she was fine. She's been borrowing gas money, Marcy added. $20 here and there. Said Brian was handling their finances and sometimes forgot to leave her cash. Can you help? I asked. When we go in, Sarah's going to need support. People who can remind her that she deserves better than this. All three immediately agreed. Deborah even offered her guest room if Sarah needed somewhere to stay temporarily. That's when I revealed my plan to remove everyone from the house permanently. All of them, Linda asked. Even Brian. Especially Brian, I said firmly. He's the one who opened the door to these parasites. He's the one who's been stealing from her while telling her she's not doing enough. He's the worst of them, because Sarah trusted him with her heart. We scheduled everything for New Year's Eve day. The Morrisons would be hungover from their celebrations, less likely to put up coordinated resistance. James would arrive with the legal documents and 2 sheriff's deputies. Carl would be there to document everything. Sarah's friends would come as emotional support and witnesses. But first, I had one more piece of preparation. I drove out to see Dorothy, who'd been faithfully documenting the comings and goings at Sarah's house. It's like a revolving door, she said, showing me photos. Different cars every week. I've seen them carrying out furniture, Sarah's furniture, loading electronics into vans. They're stripping the place. One photo stopped me cold. Sarah in the garden she'd planted with such hope being berated by Martha while holding a basket of vegetables. Even from a distance, I could see her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. When was this? I asked. Yesterday morning. That woman had her working outside in 30-degree weather harvesting winter vegetables for some party they're planning. That decided it. I'd waited long enough. I called James and moved our timeline up. Can you be ready by tomorrow? For Sarah, I'll be ready in an hour if needed. I made one final call to Sarah, keeping my voice carefully neutral. Sweetheart, I'm planning to stop by tomorrow afternoon. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Oh, she sounded exhausted. Mom tomorrow's not really good. Everyone's preparing for New Year's Eve and… 2 o'clock, I said firmly. I'll see you then. Mom, please, Eugene said. Eugene's not your mother. I am. 2 o'clock, Sarah. Be ready. I hung up before she could protest further. Let them wonder what be ready meant. Let them scramble to clean up or hide their schemes. It wouldn't matter. In 36 hours, I was going to reclaim my daughter's life. And the Morrisons were about to learn what happened when they mistook kindness for weakness. Sarah might be too gentle to fight back, but I'd spent 30 years in real estate. I'd faced down corrupt contractors, predatory lenders, and abusive husbands trying to steal their wives' assets. The Morrison family thought they were predators. They were about to discover they were just scavengers, and the real predator had been watching them all along. Me. A 68-year-old woman with arthritis, reading glasses, and absolutely nothing left to lose except her daughter. They'd taken her money, her dignity, and her joy. They'd turned my gift of love into a prison, but they'd forgotten one crucial thing. The house was still mine, and tomorrow I was taking it back. That night, I laid out everything like a general preparing for battle. Legal documents in one folder, evidence of crimes in another, contact information for every relevant authority, photos showing the systematic destruction of Sarah's life. 5 years of mortgage payments, insurance, and taxes, all paid by me, all proving my ownership. I thought about calling Sarah one more time, warning her about what was coming. But I knew she'd panic, maybe even warn Brian. The element of surprise was crucial. So instead, I looked at her wedding photo, the one where she stood in front of that house with such hope in her eyes, and I made her a promise. Tomorrow, baby girl. Tomorrow you get your life back. And anyone who stands in the way is going to learn why you never ever come between a mother and her daughter. New Year's Eve arrived with an unseasonably warm morning, as if nature itself was preparing for the house cleaning about to occur. I woke at 5, too wired to sleep any longer. By 6, I was dressed in my most professional outfit, the power suit I'd worn to close million-dollar deals. If the Morrisons wanted to see me as a harmless old woman, they were in for a surprise. James Patterson called at 7 to confirm everything was ready. Deputies will meet us there. Carl's already in position to document. Are you sure you want to do this today? 18 people have been torturing my daughter for months, I said. We're 6 days overdue as far as I'm concerned. I arrived at Sarah's house at exactly 2 in the afternoon, but I wasn't alone. 2 sheriff's deputies, James Patterson with his briefcase full of legal documents, Carl Winters with his camera, and Sarah's 3 teacher friends all pulled up within minutes of each other. I'd also invited Dorothy to witness and document everything. The scene that greeted us was even worse than Christmas Eve. Cars and trucks cluttered every available space. Through the windows, I could see multiple people lounging around, and the sound of loud music thumped from inside. Sarah's car was blocked in by 3 other vehicles trapped like she was. "Ready?" James asked. "I've been ready for months," I replied. I knocked on the door. My daughter's door, the door I'd tied a bow on 5 years ago. Eugene answered, his face souring when he saw the crowd behind me. "What's this? We don't take visitors today." "We're not visitors," I said calmly. "May we come in?" "No, Sarah's busy. Come back another time, alone." One of the deputies stepped forward. "Sir, we're here on a legal matter. Please step aside." Eugene's face went pale, but he blustered. "You can't just barge in here. This is private property." "Yes, it is," I agreed. "My private property, and you're trespassing on it." Before he could respond, I walked past him into the house. The destruction was even worse in daylight. Burns on every surface, holes in walls, stains on carpets I'd helped Sarah choose. The smell of unwashed bodies and rotting food made my stomach turn. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, saw the group, and froze. She looked even worse than at Christmas. Hollow-eyed, trembling, a fresh bruise on her collarbone, poorly hidden by her shirt collar. "Mom," she whispered, "what's happening?" "We're taking back your life, sweetheart. Where's Brian?" Brian appeared from the living room, his parents flanking him. Marcus, Tanya, Janet, and Roy all converged from various rooms drawn by the commotion. The teenagers peered down from the stairs. Good. I wanted them all here for this. "Everyone in the living room," I commanded. "Now." "You can't order us around in our own home," Martha screeched. "This isn't your home," James said, opening his briefcase. "I'm James Patterson, attorney for the property owner, Ms. Alvina Thompson. I'm here to serve legal notices." The room erupted in shouting. Brian demanding to know what was going on, Eugene threatening to call his own lawyer, Martha, screaming about elder abuse. I ignored them all, walking to Sarah and taking her hand. "Sit down, sweetheart. You don't have to serve anyone anymore." "Sarah, get back in the kitchen," Brian snapped. "We have guests." "She's not your servant," Linda said, stepping forward with Marcy and Deborah. "She's not anybody's servant." James cleared his throat loudly. "If everyone would please be quiet, I need to read these documents." "We're not listening to anything," Eugene said. "Brian, throw these people out." Brian started forward, but the deputies stepped in his path. "Sir, I suggest you sit down and listen." James began reading from the deed and trust documents, his voice cutting through their protests. The property at 427 Oak Hollow Road is owned solely by Alvina Thompson, held in trust with lifetime use rights granted to Sarah Thompson Morrison. These use rights do not include the authority to sell, transfer, or establish permanent residency for individuals without the owner's express written consent. "That's a lie," Brian shouted. "Sarah owns this house." "No," I said quietly. "I own this house. I always have. And I never gave permission for any of you except Brian to live here." James continued reading. Individual trespass notices for each person. Eugene, Martha, Marcus, Tanya, Janet, Roy, the 3 teenagers. Each one was formally notified that they were illegally occupying the property and had exactly 8 minutes to vacate before facing criminal trespass charges. 8 minutes! Janet laughed hysterically. "You can't throw us out in 8 minutes. We have rights." "You have no rights to this property," James said. "You're not tenants. You never signed a lease, never paid rent. You're trespassers who have taken advantage of Mrs. Morrison's kind nature." Carl had been quietly photographing everything. The damage, the reactions, the moment when Roy stepped aggressively toward me, only to be blocked by a deputy. "I'd be careful, Mr. Henley," the deputy said. "Threatening the property owner won't help your situation, especially given your parole status." Roy's face went white. "How did you—" "We know about all of you." I said, letting ice creep into my voice. Marcus, your ex-wife, is very interested in your current location. Those child support warrants haven't gone away. Eugene, some gentlemen in Chicago have been looking for you. Something about $50,000. The room went silent except for Sarah's quiet gasps as she realized what had been happening around her. Tanya. I continued. Those retail theft charges are still active. And Janet, I believe the FBI takes wire fraud very seriously, especially when it crosses state lines. You're bluffing, Martha said, but her voice shook. Mrs. Morrison. James said, we have copies of 3 lawsuits against you for property damage and unpaid rent. You've done this before, haven't you? Found vulnerable people to take advantage of. I pulled out my phone and showed them the timer. 8 minutes, starting now. You can't do this, Eugene roared. We'll sue. We'll take everything you have. With what money? I asked. The money you stole from my daughter. Her teacher's retirement fund you drained. The credit cards you opened in her name. Brian's parents looked at their son, who had gone pale. Brian. Martha's voice wavered. What's she talking about? About the federal crimes your son committed, James said. Wire fraud, identity theft, financial exploitation. The FBI will be very interested in those bank transfers to your account, Mrs. Morrison. The timer showed 6 minutes. Marcus was the first to break running upstairs. I'm not going back to jail for you people. It was like dominoes falling. Tanya followed screaming at Marcus. The teenagers scattered to grab their things. Janet turned on Brian, screeching about how this was his fault, how he'd promised them easy money and a free place to live. Shut up, Brian screamed back. Just shut up. That's enough, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. Sarah, do you have anything to say to these people? My daughter stood slowly supported by her friends. She looked at each face and I saw something shift in her eyes. The fog of abuse lifting, replaced by dawning anger. You stole everything from me, she said quietly. My money, my peace, my home. I cooked for you, cleaned for you, gave up my bed for you, and you treated me like garbage. Your family, Martha protested. Family takes care of each other. No, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. Family doesn't leave bruises. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't make you sleep in an attic in winter while they take your bedroom. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing the finger marks on her arm. Linda gasped. The deputy took photos. Who did this? He asked. Sarah looked directly at Eugene. He did, when I suggested they might contribute to groceries last week. That's assault, the deputy said. Would you like to press charges? Yes, Sarah said without hesitation. I would. The timer showed 3 minutes. The house was chaos as people grabbed belongings, shoved things in garbage bags, cursed and threatened and blamed each other. Roy tried to take the television, but Carl stopped him. That stays. We have photos showing it was here before you arrived. Sarah. Brian grabbed her arm. You can't let her do this. I'm your husband. She looked at his hand on her arm, then at his face. Let go of me. We can work this out. Send them away, but not me. I love you. You love me. Sarah laughed a broken sound. You let them torture me. You stole from me. You watched your father bruise me and did nothing. She reached into her pocket and pulled out an envelope. Divorce papers. Her friends had helped her file them weeks ago, waiting for the right moment. I want you gone too, she said, handing him the papers. And don't bother contesting. We have evidence of everything you've done. 1 minute left. The deputies were herding people out, checking for stolen items. Eugene made one last stand at the door. This isn't over. We'll be back. This is our home. No, I said, stepping forward. This is my house, and if any of you set foot on this property again, you'll be arrested. You can't keep us from Brian, he's family. Brian is a soon-to-be ex-husband who committed federal crimes, James said. I suspect he'll be too busy with the FBI to visit anyone. 30 seconds. They were all outside now, milling in the driveway, still shouting threats and complaints. Brian stood apart, staring at Sarah through the window with an expression I couldn't read. 10 seconds. I walked to the front door where they could all see me. 5 seconds. The deputies were ready to arrest anyone who didn't leave. 0. Get off my property, I said clearly, now. They scattered like roaches when the light comes on. Cars starting, people cramming into vehicles, still cursing and threatening lawsuits. They'd never file. Brian was the last to leave, climbing into his car alone after his family abandoned him. As they drove away, Eugene rolled down his window for one last shout. How can you do this to family? I stepped onto the porch, Sarah beside me, and called out 3 words that would haunt them forever. Read the deed. Then I closed the gate. The lock clicked with beautiful finality. Inside, Sarah collapsed into my arms, sobbing with relief and exhaustion and freedom. Her friends surrounded us, offering comfort and promises of help. The deputies took statements, documented injuries, promised to file reports that would help with the criminal cases to come. But in that moment, all that mattered was my daughter in my arms, finally safe in the home I'd given her. The house was damaged, her trust was shattered, her finances were destroyed, but she was free. And the Morrisons. They were about to learn that 8 minutes was generous compared to what was coming next. The silence after the last car disappeared felt like the first breath after nearly drowning. Sarah stood trembling in my arms while her friends murmured reassurances, and the deputies finished their documentation. But I knew this wasn't over. People like the Morrisons didn't give up easily. They'd regroup, plan, try to worm their way back in. We had to be ready. Let's go inside, I said gently. We have work to do. The house looked like a tornado had struck. In their frantic 8-minute scramble, they'd knocked over furniture, left drawers hanging open, dropped belongings they deemed not worth saving. The smell of cigarette smoke and unwashed bodies lingered, but underneath it I could sense the bones of the home this used to be. Deputy Williams, the senior officer, approached with his notebook. Mrs. Thompson, we need to document everything for the reports. This is going to help with both the criminal charges and any civil suits. Carl's been photographing everything, I said, nodding to the private investigator who was methodically capturing every detail. We want a complete record. What we found in the next 2 hours turned my stomach. The master bedroom where Eugene and Martha had stayed was destroyed. Cigarette burns in the hardwood floors, food ground into the carpet holes punched in walls. They'd gone through Sarah's jewelry box, taking anything valuable, and leaving broken costume pieces scattered on the dresser. My grandmother's pearls, Sarah whispered, touching an empty velvet box. My engagement ring, all gone. Linda put an arm around her. We'll get them back. They couldn't have sold everything yet. The other bedrooms were equally devastated. Marcus and Tanya had carved profanity into the doorframe. Janet's room reeked of marijuana with paraphernalia hastily abandoned in the rush to leave. The teenagers had drawn on walls, ripped curtains, and somehow managed to break the ceiling fan. But it was the kitchen that made Sarah break down completely. Every wedding gift, every carefully chosen item for her home had been misused, broken, or stolen. Her grandmother's cast iron pans were rusted from improper care. The china we'd picked out together was chipped and stained. The KitchenAid mixer she'd saved for was gone. I can't, she sobbed. It's all ruined. Everything's ruined. No, I said firmly. Things are broken, but you're not, and things can be replaced. Carl pulled me aside. I've got enough documentation to bury them in civil court. The criminal stuff is even better. Want me to start making calls? Yes, start with Marcus's ex-wife. I'm sure she'll be thrilled to know where he is. While the deputies gathered evidence and took statements, we discovered more about the Morrison family's schemes. In what used to be Brian's home office, we found notebooks detailing their plans. Eugene had been corresponding with developers promising to deliver the house for quick sale. Brian had spreadsheets showing how he'd systematically drained accounts, moved money applied for credit in Sarah's name. They planned this, Deputy Williams said, studying the papers. This wasn't a family falling on hard times. This was organized exploitation. Even worse were the personal notes. Martha's diary revealed her contempt for Sarah, calling her the stupid cow and our meal ticket. Janet had written gleefully about making Sarah wait on them, enjoying the power. Marcus had bragged in texts about living rent-free in a mansion, while his idiot sister-in-law did all the work. "Ma'am," Deputy Chen approached Sarah carefully. "We need to photograph your injuries for the assault charges." Sarah nodded numbly, rolling up her sleeves to reveal not just the fresh bruises, but older ones in various stages of healing. Linda gasped. Marcy cursed under her breath. I had to turn away to control my rage. The bruises mapped a history of casual violence. Grab marks on her upper arms, a larger bruise on her shoulder where someone had shoved her, finger marks on her wrists from being yanked around. Each one carefully hidden under long sleeves, each one a moment when my daughter had suffered in silence. "There are more," Sarah said quietly, "but I can't." "That's okay," Deputy Chen said gently. "We have enough. You're very brave for doing this." While the documentation continued, Sarah's friends and I started the first phase of reclaiming the house. We opened every window despite the cool air letting freshness chase away the stale smell of too many unwashed bodies. We gathered the abandoned belongings into piles, some clearly the Morrisons', others Sarah's things they'd appropriated. That's when Deborah found the hidden stash in the basement. "You need to see this," she called. In plastic bins marked Christmas decorations were Sarah's missing items, her grandmother's pearls, her engagement ring, electronics that had supposedly been stolen, even small appliances from the kitchen. They'd been systematically stealing and storing, probably planning to take it all when they eventually forced the house sale. "They were robbing me the whole time," Sarah said, her voice hollow, "living in my house, eating my food, and robbing me." The phone started ringing. Unknown numbers I didn't answer. Then Sarah's cell began buzzing with texts. Brian first oscillating between threats and pleas, then his family members each trying different tactics. Martha played the abandoned elder card. Eugene threatened legal action. Marcus promised to burn the place down if we didn't let them back in. "Give me your phone," I told Sarah. "You don't need to see this." But one call I did take, from Eugene and Martha's previous landlord in Illinois. James had reached out to him, and he was eager to help. "Those people destroyed my property," he said. 6 months of free living while claiming hardship, then vanished in the night, owing $12,000 in damages. "I'll testify to anything you need." By evening, the immediate chaos had settled. The deputies had left with boxes of evidence and promises to file charges immediately. Carl had uploaded all documentation to secure servers. James was preparing cease and desist orders and civil suits that would pursue the Morrisons across state lines if necessary. Sarah sat on her vandalized couch, looking lost. "What now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild," I said. "Starting with dinner. Real food, not whatever slop they demanded you make." But as I headed to the kitchen, Sarah's phone rang with a Tennessee number. Against my better judgment, she answered it. "Hello, yes, this is Sarah Morrison." Her face paled. "What, when, are you sure?" She hung up, hands shaking. "That was the bank. Brian went there after he left. He tried to empty our joint account, the one with the last of my paycheck, but it was already gone. This morning, someone used my debit card to withdraw everything. $3,000, the emergency fund I'd hidden from him." We looked at each other, the implication clear. In their 8-minute scramble, someone had stolen her hidden card and cleaned out her final safety net. "The cameras," Carl said suddenly. "This morning, when I was setting up, I put a small camera by the front door and one in the kitchen. Let me check the footage." We crowded around his laptop as he pulled up the files. There, clear as day, was Martha. In the chaos of leaving, while others grabbed belongings, she'd slipped into Sarah's purse, hanging by the door. She'd taken the card memorized or already known the PIN and stopped at an ATM on their way out of town. "That's grand theft," Deputy Williams said when we called him back. "Combined with the elder abuse claims she's been making, this shows clear malicious intent. I'll put out warrants tonight." Sarah laughed, a sound devoid of humor. She screamed about elder abuse while stealing the last money I had to my name. Perfect. As night fell, we assessed the full situation. The house was damaged but structurally sound. Sarah was physically safe but emotionally shattered and financially devastated. The Morrisons were gone but still threatening to return. Brian was served divorce papers but would likely fight dirty. "You're staying with me tonight," I announced. No arguments. "But the house?" "We'll be here tomorrow. You need rest, real food, and a locked door between you and the world." Linda, Marcy, and Deborah had already organized shifts to help with cleaning and repairs. Dorothy promised to keep watch and call if any Morrison vehicles appeared in the neighborhood. Carl would monitor digital threats and coordinate with law enforcement. As we prepared to leave, Sarah walked through her ruined home one more time. She stopped in what had been her grandmother's room, now defiled by strangers, and picked up a photo that had fallen behind the dresser. It showed her on her wedding day standing in front of this house with such hope. "I was so naive," she whispered. "You were trusting," I corrected. "There's nothing wrong with having a good heart. The fault lies with those who exploited it." Will they really stay away? I thought about lying, offering false comfort, but Sarah deserved truth. Probably not. People like that don't give up easily. But now we're ready for them, and they're about to discover what happens when they come back. As I locked the door behind us, I noticed movement in the bushes across the street, a figure ducking out of sight. I pretended not to see, but made a mental note to tell Carl. If the Morrisons thought they could surveil the house and sneak back in, they were about to learn otherwise. The war wasn't over. They'd lost this battle, but people who felt entitled to others' possessions rarely surrendered. They'd regroup, maybe try legal manipulation, maybe attempt intimidation, maybe just sneak back thinking we'd grown complacent. But I'd spent 30 years in real estate dealing with every dirty trick imaginable. I'd protected my daughter's future once by structuring that deed correctly. Now I'd protect her present by being ready for whatever came next. The 8-minute eviction had been just the beginning. Phase 1 of reclaiming Sarah's life. Phase 2 would be rebuilding what they'd broken. And Phase 3, making sure they paid for every moment of pain they'd caused my daughter. They thought they'd moved into a house. They'd actually walked into a trap 5 years in the making. And now that it had sprung, there was no escape. Let them scheme. Let them threaten. Let them try to return. I'd be waiting, and next time they wouldn't get 8 minutes. They wouldn't get 8 seconds. 6 months. That's how long it took to fully reclaim Sarah's life from the wreckage the Morrisons left behind. 6 months of legal battles, restoration work, and healing. But as I stood in her garden that July morning watching her harvest tomatoes, she'd replanted with her own hands, I knew every minute had been worth it. The immediate aftermath of the eviction had been brutal. True to form, the Morrisons hadn't gone quietly into the night. Within 24 hours of being removed, they'd launched a campaign of harassment that showed just how deep their entitlement ran. Eugene filed a complaint with Adult Protective Services claiming I'd thrown a disabled elder into the street. Martha told anyone who'd listen that we'd stolen her belongings and life savings. Brian played the victim to his co-workers, painting Sarah as an unstable wife who'd chosen her mother over her marriage. But we were ready for them. Carl's surveillance caught Eugene sneaking back to the property at 3 a.m, trying to break in through a basement window. The security system I'd immediately installed sent alerts to both my phone and the police. Eugene was arrested for attempted burglary in violation of the restraining order. His claim of just trying to retrieve forgotten medication fell apart when officers found burglary tools in his pockets. Marcus made it 2 weeks before his ex-wife's lawyer tracked him down at a motel in Memphis. The child support warrants finally caught up with him, and he was extradited back to Illinois. His panicked calls to Sarah from jail begging her to bail him out, as family, went unanswered. Tanya disappeared, but not before maxing out 3 credit cards she'd opened in Sarah's name. We added identity theft to the growing list of charges. The investigation into Martha's theft of Sarah's emergency fund revealed a pattern going back years. She'd done the same thing to 3 other vulnerable people. Moved in, claiming hardship, gained access to finances, then cleaned them out before disappearing. The federal investigators were very interested in her interstate fraud pattern. When they arrested her at a casino in Biloxi, she had Sarah's stolen jewelry in her possession and chips purchased with the stolen money. But it was Brian's downfall that provided the most satisfaction. His bank conducted an internal audit after our lawyer provided evidence of his financial crimes. They discovered he'd been using his position to access and manipulate not just Sarah's accounts, but had been skimming from elderly customers for years. The Morrison family's expensive lifestyle hadn't been funded by Sarah alone. Brian had been stealing from dozens of victims. The FBI raid on his apartment was caught by a news crew. I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy as they led him away in handcuffs, his face pale with the realization that his house of cards had finally collapsed. He'd thought himself so clever, using his banking knowledge to drain accounts in ways that looked legitimate. But federal investigators were cleverer, and the trail he'd left was damning. Janet and Roy tried one last desperate play. They showed up at Sarah's school, causing a scene demanding she drop all charges because family doesn't do this to family. The principal, who'd been fully briefed on the situation, had them removed by security. Roy's parole officer was notified, and he was back in prison within a week. Janet, facing fraud charges, and without her support system, fled the state. Last we heard, she was arrested in Florida, trying to run the same scam on another vulnerable family. Even the teenagers faced consequences. Their vandalism and theft at the house, combined with their school records, led to juvenile detention and mandatory counseling. Maybe they'd learn what their parents never had, that other people's belongings weren't theirs for the taking. Throughout it all, Sarah grew stronger. The first weeks were the hardest. She'd jump at every sound, expecting them to burst through the door. She'd apologize constantly, as if needing permission to exist in her own home. But with therapy, the support of her friends, and the steady progress of legal justice, she began to reclaim herself. We restored the house together, making it better than before. Every weekend, friends would come to help. We ripped out smoke-damaged carpets and refinished the original hardwood floors underneath. We patched holes and painted walls in colors Sarah chose, not what Brian had demanded or his family had defiled. We replaced broken furniture with pieces that reflected her style, not their laziness. The garden became our special project. The Morrisons had let it die, too focused on taking to bother tending. But Sarah and I spent hours in the soil planting new life where they'd sown destruction. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs, flowers, each plant a small act of defiance against those who'd tried to steal her joy. The financial recovery took longer. The identity theft alone required hundreds of hours to untangle. But Sarah's school rallied around her. Teachers donated to a fund to help her get back on her feet. The principal not only gave her the department head position, but backdated the raise to when she should have received it before the Morrisons had sabotaged her career. Slowly, account by account, she rebuilt her financial life, with safeguards the Morrisons could never breach again. The divorce was finalized in May. Brian, facing federal charges and having hidden assets exposed, got nothing. No alimony, no claim to the house, no share of the teacher retirement fund he'd emptied. The judge, reviewing the evidence of financial abuse and theft, granted Sarah everything and ordered Brian to pay restitution that would follow him even into prison. On the day the divorce was final, Sarah did something that showed how far she'd come. She took her wedding ring, the one we'd recovered from Martha's stash, and sold it. With the money, she donated to a women's shelter that helped abuse victims escape financial exploitation. The director, hearing her story, asked if she'd speak at their fundraiser. That's how the Alvina Thompson House was born. Sarah's speech that night was powerful. She told her story without shame, explaining how even educated, independent women could fall victim to systematic abuse disguised as family obligation. She talked about the isolation, the gradual erosion of self-worth, the financial manipulation that trapped victims in terrible situations. But mostly, she talked about hope, about mothers who see the truth, about friends who stand by you, about communities that rally to protect their own. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in. Other women shared their stories. Local lawyers offered pro bono services for victims of financial abuse. The shelter expanded their programs to include financial literacy and legal aid. By July, Sarah had transformed from victim to advocate. The house that had been her prison became a symbol of survival. We hosted support groups in the living room where she'd been humiliated. We served meals in the kitchen where she'd been a servant. The garden where Martha had berated her became a place of healing with vegetables donated to the food bank and flowers brightening the shelter. And Lovett found her again quietly and respectfully. Dr. James Hartley was the veterinarian who'd treated Dorothy's cat. He'd heard about Sarah's story through the small-town grapevine and admired her strength from afar. When he finally asked her for coffee, it was with an understanding of boundaries and patience for trust to rebuild. He was everything Brian hadn't been, genuinely kind, financially responsible, and horrified at the thought of anyone mistreating Sarah. He had his own home, his own life, and no interest in taking hers. When he helped in the garden, it was as a partner, not a supervisor. When he stayed for dinner, he cooked alongside her, not demanding to be served. "I'm scared," Sarah admitted to me one evening as we sat on the porch swing Brian's family had tried to break. "What if I'm wrong again?" "You're not the same person who married Brian," I reminded her. "You know the warning signs now. You know your worth. And you know that house comes with a very protective mother who reads all the fine print." She laughed a real laugh, not the hollow sound from 6 months ago. "James asked if you come with the house. I told him you absolutely do. He said he wouldn't have it any other way." Smart man. He'd already won points by having his own financial advisor create a clear separation of assets, insisting Sarah protect what she'd fought so hard to reclaim. He understood that trust was earned in actions, not words, and he was willing to earn it however long it took. The anniversary of the eviction approached, 1 year since that 8-minute scramble that changed everything. We decided to mark it with a celebration not of their leaving, but of Sarah's survival. The garden party fundraiser for the shelter would happen in the very space where abuse had flourished, showing that healing was stronger than harm. The morning of the party, I found Sarah in her grandmother's room, now restored as a craft space where she created art for therapy and sale. She was putting finishing touches on a painting that would be auctioned that afternoon. It showed a house with its door open, light spilling out, and a woman standing on the threshold, not entering or leaving, but choosing. "It's beautiful," I said. "It's home," she replied. "Finally really home." The party was a success beyond our dreams. Over 100 people came to support the shelter bid on art and celebrate survival. Sarah spoke again this time with the confidence of someone who'd not just survived, but thrived. She thanked her friends, her colleagues, the legal system that had ultimately protected her, and the community that had rallied around her. When she thanked me, tears flowed freely. "My mother gave me this house twice," she said. "Once as a wedding gift, and once again when she gave me the courage to reclaim it. She taught me that love isn't just about giving. It's about protecting what you give. It's about being willing to fight for someone even when they can't fight for themselves. It's about knowing that some gifts come with conditions, and the most important condition is that you never let anyone make you feel worthless in your own home." As the sun set over the garden, guests mingled and shared stories. Other mothers approached me sharing their own battles to protect their children from exploitation. We formed an informal network watching out for each other's families, sharing resources and warnings. The Morrisons had tried to destroy one family, but had inadvertently created a community of protection. Dorothy summed it up best as she helped clean up. They thought they were moving into a free house. Instead, they walked into a hornet's nest of good people who wouldn't stand for their nonsense. Late that evening, after everyone had gone, Sarah and I sat on the porch steps where she'd once scrubbed on her knees. The house glowed with warm light, filled with good memories finally outweighing the bad. Her phone buzzed with a text from James checking that the party had gone well, saying he was proud of her work for the shelter. She smiled a real smile that reached her eyes. "Mom," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." My heart clenched, old fears rising. "What is it?" "Thank you. Not just for saving me, but for showing me I was worth saving. For teaching me that it's okay to have boundaries, to demand respect, to protect what's mine. The Morrisons took a lot from me, but they also gave me something without meaning to. They showed me how strong we really are when we stand together." I hugged my daughter, thinking about the journey from that horrible Christmas discovery to this moment of peace. The Morrisons were gone. Some in prison, others fled, all facing consequences they'd never imagined. They'd thought kindness was weakness, that family bonds were chains to exploit. They'd learned too late that real family protects each other, that mothers will move heaven and earth for their children, and that legal documents properly written are stronger than any manipulation. "So what now?" I asked. Sarah gestured around the restored house, the thriving garden, the evidence of a life reclaimed and purpose found. "Now we keep growing. We help others. We stay vigilant, and we never ever forget the power of 3 words. Read the deed." She grinned. "Read the deed, but also 3 other words I've learned." "What's that?" "Know your worth." As we headed inside, I noticed a bronze plaque had been installed by the door. Sarah had commissioned it as a surprise. It read, "The Alvina Thompson House, where women stand strong, dedicated to all mothers who protect their daughters and all daughters who find their strength." Below that, in smaller letters, "Trespassers will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law." Perfect, absolutely perfect. That night, I slept peacefully in the guest room of the house I'd bought with such hope years ago. Down the hall, my daughter slept safely in her own home, free from fear and exploitation. The Morrisons were scattered to the winds, facing justice or running from it. The house stood strong, filled with light and laughter and purpose. The deed had been read. The message had been delivered. And the 3 words that had ended their reign of terror had become a rallying cry for others facing similar battles. Sometimes love means giving generous gifts. Sometimes it means protecting those gifts with everything you have. And sometimes, when faced with those who would exploit kindness and destroy dreams, it means standing at the gate with legal documents in hand and ice in your voice saying simply, "Read the deed." Because a mother's love isn't just soft and nurturing. It's also fierce and protective. It plans ahead and keeps receipts. It knows when to embrace and when to evict. The Morrisons learned that lesson the hard way. 8 minutes to leave. A lifetime to regret ever walking through that door. And Sarah. She learned that being kind doesn't mean being weak. That family isn't about blood, but about respect. That sometimes the greatest gift a mother can give her daughter isn't just a house. It's the backbone to defend it. Dear friends, if you've made it this far, you've witnessed what happens when a mother's love meets legal preparedness. Have you or someone you know ever faced family members who confused generosity with weakness? How did you handle those who felt entitled to what wasn't theirs? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find their strength. If this story touched your heart or reminded you to protect what matters, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories of women standing strong. And please share this with anyone who needs to remember that kindness should never be repaid with cruelty, and that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is show people the door. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, always read the fine print, trust your instincts, and never be afraid to stand up for what's yours. Until next time, may your homes be filled with respect, your hearts with courage, and your deeds properly secured.